It was a chilly December evening, and my wife Claire and I were hosting a family dinner. The air smelled of roasted turkey and spiced cider, our house filled with the warmth of laughter and conversation. I had been looking forward to this night for weeks. Family gatherings had always been a cornerstone of my life, a time to bond and celebrate the little things that made us whole. Claire had been distant lately, but I chalked it up to her workload at the hospital. She'd always been a dedicated nurse, and I admired that about her. But tonight, as she walked into the living room wearing a jacket I didn't recognize, a subtle alarm went off in my mind. It wasn't just any jacket. It was a sleek leather bomber, far more stylish than anything Claire usually wore. Claire's wardrobe was understated and classic. This jacket screamed edgy sophistication. What caught my attention most, though, was how she clutched it around her like it was something precious. "Nice jacket," I commented as she poured herself a glass of wine. "Is it new?" She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before smiling. "Yeah, I picked it up last week." Something about her answer didn't sit right. Claire hated shopping for herself, and she certainly didn't buy things on impulse. But I let it go. Tonight wasn't the night to overthink. As the evening wore on, the jacket became a centerpiece of casual compliments. My sister-in-law gushed about how trendy it looked. My father made a joke about midlife crises, and Claire just smiled politely. She seemed uncomfortable, shifting in her seat, avoiding eye contact. I made a mental note to ask her about it later. Later came sooner than expected. While clearing the table, Claire stepped out to take a phone call. Curious and, I'll admit, a little suspicious, I reached for the jacket hanging on the back of her chair. My fingers grazed something in the pocket. A piece of paper. It was a dry cleaning receipt. The name on it wasn't hers. It read, Eric S. My stomach churned. Eric. I'd heard his name before, mentioned in passing as a co-worker she occasionally grabbed lunch with. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations I hadn't thought twice about at the time. The late nights, the sudden interest in her appearance, and now this. I'm not a rash man, but something inside me snapped. I knew I couldn't confront her here, not in front of family. Instead, I decided to gather evidence. If Claire was lying to me, I wanted the full story before I acted. Over the next few days, I played the role of the oblivious husband. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings, wished her a good day at work, and even offered to pick her up lunch on one occasion. Meanwhile, I scoured her social media, checked our phone bill for unusual numbers, and even did something I'd never imagined doing. I looked through her messages. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Claire and Eric had been exchanging texts for months. Flirty, intimate messages, references to inside jokes and plans to meet, and one text that made my blood run cold. "Can't wait to see you in that jacket again." I felt a mix of heartbreak and fury. Claire wasn't just cheating, she was flaunting it, bringing evidence of her betrayal into our home. That's when I decided this wasn't going to end quietly. If she wanted to disrespect me, I'd show her the cost of underestimating the man she'd married. The next family dinner was already scheduled for the following week, a Christmas Eve gathering. I spent the days leading up to it preparing. I printed the texts, gathered photos from Eric's public social media accounts, and even found a few pictures of them together at what appeared to be a bar. I'd been careful not to confront her or give her any reason to suspect I knew. If I was going to reveal her lies, I wanted an audience. The night of the dinner, Claire was radiant. She wore a red dress that hugged her figure and laughed easily with our guests. But there was an edge to her, a nervousness I recognized now that I knew what to look for. She was probably wondering if I'd noticed her recent absences, or maybe she thought she'd covered her tracks well enough. By dessert, everyone was seated in the living room, enjoying coffee and cake. I decided it was time. "Before we open presents," I said, raising my glass, "I have a little surprise for Claire." She looked at me, puzzled but smiling. "Oh, you know how much I love you," I began, my voice steady, "and how much I value honesty and trust in our marriage." The room grew quiet. Claire's smile faltered. "So, when you wore that jacket last week," I continued, "I couldn't help but be curious about where it came from. Imagine my surprise when I found a dry cleaning receipt with someone else's name on it." Her eyes widened and the color drained from her face. "James, what are you talking about?" I ignored her and pulled out a folder I'd hidden under the coffee table. Eric S., I said, letting the name hang in the air. Sound familiar? Gasps erupted around the room. Claire stammered, I don't know what you're... Save it, I snapped, my voice rising. I've seen the texts, Claire. I know about the lunches, the late nights, the jacket, and so does everyone else now. I opened the folder and began passing out copies of the texts and photos. The room was a cacophony of shocked murmurs and Claire's frantic protests. She reached for the papers, but my sister-in-law snatched them away. How could you? My mother asked, tears in her eyes. James, please, Claire pleaded, her voice breaking. Let's talk about this privately. Oh, now you want privacy? I shot back. You didn't seem to care about privacy when you were sneaking around with Eric. I stood towering over her. She crumbled into the couch. You've humiliated me, Claire. But tonight I'm taking that power back. You don't get to lie and cheat and walk away without consequences. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was Claire's quiet. Finally, my father stood, his face etched with disappointment. Claire, he said, his voice stern, you owe James an explanation and an apology. Right now. But I didn't wait for her to respond. I'd had enough. I grabbed my coat and keys, turning to address the room one last time. I'll be filing for divorce first thing tomorrow, I announced. Claire, you can keep the jacket. Consider it a parting gift. With that, I walked out, leaving her betrayal and her shame on full display. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of lawyers, paperwork, and awkward conversations with friends and family. Claire tried reaching out a few times, but I blocked her number. There was nothing left to say. Eric's name spread through her workplace like wildfire, and from what I heard, his marriage didn't survive the fallout either. Revenge may not heal all wounds, but exposing the truth? That was its own kind of satisfaction.